I've been creating an outline for a novel about a protagonist who is looking for a loved one and ends up in a series of mysteries that has their worldview destroyed. Hopefully this will become a series, but for now the first novel starts in New York and it ends in Louisiana. And I chose these locations for a variety of reasons, but the most important reason was the stark contrast between the tenuous order of a big city at odds with the superstition and chaos of a place that has bayous and backwaters. As with everything else I spend my time on, my passion will always lean towards the supernatural or paranormal, and this story is no exception. Louisiana is a unique location with a melting pot of cultures, religious beliefs, and folklore. Some of that folklore is older than the founding of our nation. Pre-colonial reports have described a variety of cryptids, supernatural encounters, elementals, and high-strangeness. Today there are mentions of ancient beings that populate New Orleans, as well as a whole host of paranormal and cryptic creatures in the woods and waterways. As we look further into the state, whose motto is union, justice, and confidence, I'm confident that you will look at Louisiana in a different light by the end of this tale. Welcome to Arcane Station. I'm your host, Mike Porter. My first foray into Louisiana was for a launch party for a game I worked on called Nocturne. As we sat on the balcony overlooking the courtyard at Pat O'Brien's, I felt that New Orleans was something different. I felt like the air was thick with mystery and intrigue. When we took the ghost tours at various locations and eventually ended up in the cemetery for the tour of the graveyard, where the bodies were laid to rest above ground, it felt like a city of the dead. Buildings with iron bars and gaping doorways that were pitch black inside. It felt like we crossed a spiritual threshold. I wish I had been able to go further, into the swamps, to the old half-submerged towns, and into places where we feel like we shouldn't go. What makes these places feel that way, dangerous and primal, is partly due to the actual dangers, like snakes, alligators, but also the legends that populate these desolate spaces that very few people wander. Typically when we think of cryptids, instinctually your mind goes to that flickering footage of Patty walking across the creek bed at Bluff Creek, or lake monsters like Ogopogo and Lake Okanagan. However, the inhabitants of Louisiana think of another creature. Their thoughts and fears conjure up the Rougarou. The Rougarou is one of Louisiana's oldest and most enduring legends, a shape-shifting creature said to stalk the swamps, bayous, and sugarcane fields of southern Louisiana. The name itself comes from the French loup-garou, meaning wolfman or werewolf. When French settlers came to the region in the 18th century, they brought the old European werewolf stories with them, but in the tangled waterways and fog-choked wetlands of the Cajun country, the legend took a life of its own. In Cajun folklore, the Rougarou is often described as a man cursed to become a beast, part human, part wolf, with glowing eyes and an insatiable hunger for blood. The cause of the curse could come from breaking a religious holiday such as Lent, committing a grave sin, or sometimes as punishment for engaging in dark witchcraft. In some versions, the curse lasts 101 days, during which the Rougarou prowls at night, attacking livestock or travelers who stray too far from home. If it sheds another person's blood, the curse passes on, and the previous victim becomes human again. A dark cycle of suffering that never really ends. Older generations used the tale of the beast as a warning. Parents told their children that if they didn't behave, played outside in the woods at night, or if they broke the rules of church, the Rougarou would come for them. In that sense, the story served as both a religious cautionary tale and as moral folklore, a way to keep the community in line when the wilderness was still dangerous and untamed. But not every Rougarou story is about superstition. In the 20th century, reports began to surface of strange creatures seen in the bayous, large, upright figures covered in hair with glowing red eyes. Some of these sightings were tied to known locations like the Honey Island Swamp or the area around Houma or Lafourche Parish. Locals describe screams in the night, livestock mutilations, and mysterious footprints deep in the mud. These accounts often blurred the line between werewolf lore and Bigfoot-type encounters, with witnesses insisting that the thing that they saw wasn't a man, but it wasn't an animal either. Modern folklorists point out that the Rougarou may be Louisiana's way of expressing a universal archetype, the beast within, the fear of the unknown just beyond the light of the fire. Still, for many Cajuns, it's more than just a tale. Some claim to have heard its growl echoing through the cypress trees, while others swear they've seen its eyes glowing just beyond the edge of a swamp road at night. The Rougarou has since become a symbol of Cajun identity, appearing in local festivals, as sports mascots, and even beer and hot sauce labels. Yet behind the humor and the commercialization, there's still an unease that runs deep. People still believe there is something stalking at the edge of the swamps at night, and many point to the Rougarou. While the Wolfman is the most common of the cryptids reported in Louisiana, there are equally strange and scary creatures being seen at the edge of civilization. Not only cryptids, but other creatures as well. Vampires are said to stalk New Orleans, and these creatures aren't the ones from Hollywood, but the kind whispered about in the dark around the French Quarter. In New Orleans, legends of the undead run deep. One such story is that of Count Jacques Saint Germain, who was a legendary vampire figure in New Orleans lore. He allegedly arrived from France in the early 20th century and claimed to be descended from the historical Comte de Saint Germain, and I'm sure I butchered that name. And he hosted extravagant parties where he never ate. The legend culminates with an incident where a woman, claiming he attacked and tried to drink blood from her, jumped from his balcony and ran away. And Saint Germain vanished after this, and police found his home filled with blood-filled bottles of wine and no sign of him. Some New Orleans residents and tourists claim to have seen a mysterious, well-dressed stranger, sometimes identified as Jack, wandering in the French Quarter, leading to speculation that the immortal Saint Germain still remains. Another story is of the casket girls who were sealed in the attic of the Ursuline convent. The casket girls were young French women sent to Louisiana colony in the 1700s to marry the single French male colonist, as there was a severe imbalance in the gender ratio. The girls were named for the caskets or small wooden chests they carried with their meager belongings inside. While the historical record shows they faced hardship and difficult marriages, the legend evolved to include a darker narrative of mysterious disappearances, leading some to believe they were vampires, a myth partially fueled by their confinement in the attic of Ursuline convent. Their stories became intertwined with local folklore and the supernatural. The harshness of their situation, their confinement, and the mysterious disappearances of some of these women led to the myth that they were vampires or were involved in vampiric activities. Locals claim that if the vampires exist anywhere in America, it was there, in New Orleans. Old world superstition, Catholic ritual, and voodoo mysticism overlap in a city that has always blurred the boundary between life and death. Whether they're relics of French folklore or something older that followed the river up from the Caribbean, the ideas of vampires still lingers in the humid air of Louisiana nights, right alongside the Rougarou and the ghosts of the Bayou. The legend of cryptids go beyond the werewolves and the vampires. In a place as mysterious as a cypress swamp, there is bound to be other creatures adapted to this unique landscape. One such creature is the Latiche. The Latiche is a swamp monster from Cajun and Native American folklore, and it describes a 7-foot-tall creature that is either an illegitimate, unbaptized infant abandoned at birth and raised by alligators, or a child spirit lost in the swamp. These ferocious beings are known to lurk in the bayous, overturn boats, and attack travelers, often identified by distinct swampy stench-like smells coming from them, and heard by the sound of scratching underneath your boat as you're moving through the bayou. Another creature is the par malfait, the swamp devil, or a Cajun boogeyman. The name literally translates to father of mischief, and to those who believe in this creature say it is very active to this day. I like to think of this thing as like the comic book creature called the Swamp Thing, or as a treant from Lord of the Rings. It's a plant-like being and covered from head to toe with Spanish moss and thick bark-like skin. It has glowing eyes, and if you're unlucky enough to wake it from its slumber, it'll hunt you down and beat you to death. This could be another cautionary tale about the swamp being dangerous and alive to ensure visitors remain vigilant. But don't take a chance. Try to stay on the path and stay quiet. In folklore, the feu follet is a mischievous spectral light from the swamps and marshes, particularly in Louisiana, and that serves as a will-o'-the-wisp type being, luring travelers into the wilderness and to their peril. These lights are often depicted as the souls of unbaptized infants or spirits who are lost and mischievous and are said to be repelled by iron. In a city known for ghosts and hauntings, New Orleans also has its very own cryptid, the Grunch. Since the early 19th century, there have been horrific tales of a grotesque, blood-sucking humanoid creature that has plagued the area and has become known as the Grunch Road Monster, also known as the Vampire of Faubourg Marnagé, and I'm sure I butchered that as well. This creature feeds on local animals and terrorizes the residents of New Orleans and surrounding towns. Another creature is the Paralangua, and it's a legendary half-human, half-alligator cryptid similar to the Latiche, but made from a union between an alligator and a female human. They are said to inhabit the swamps of North America, described as crocodile-like humanoids with red eyes and scaly, bulletproof hides. They're known for preying on people and animals at night. The legend has appeared in songs, television documentaries like The Beast of the Bayou, and other media. So we have all these other things. What about Bigfoot? Surely this place, so rich in the bizarre, must have the most recognized creature in the cryptid pantheon. When people think of Bigfoot, they usually picture the Pacific Northwest, the misty forests of Oregon or Washington. But Louisiana has its own share of Sasquatch stories. One such creature is called the Honey Island Swamp Monster. And reports of these types of beings are stretching back more than a century, from the Catahoula swamps to the pine forests of the Kisatchie National Forest. There are reports of large bipedal creatures, their howls echoing through the trees long before dawn. In the 1970s, at the same time that the Honey Island Swamp Monster sightings were taking place, rural parishes began reporting similar creatures. Witnesses described something standing 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown hair, with broad shoulders and long arms that swung like a man's. Many of these encounters followed a familiar pattern: a foul smell, a feeling of being watched, and an overpowering sense of dread. Some researchers believe the Rougarou, Honey Island Swamp Monster, and Louisiana's Bigfoot encounters are all regional variations of the same creature, a wild man of the woods, an ancient presence that bridges folklore and cryptozoology. Others take a more literal stance, arguing that the state's dense, unbroken wetlands could easily hide an unknown species. Louisiana's terrain, after all, is less explored than most people think. The Atchafalaya Basin alone covers nearly 1 million acres of swamp, with places even seasoned locals won't venture after dark. For those who have encountered it, Bigfoot in Louisiana isn't a campfire myth. Truck drivers, hunters, and fishermen tell their stories in hushed tones, reluctant to put their names on record for fear of ridicule. But every few years, another sighting slips into the local papers. A trail cam photo, a strange howl caught on audio, or a set of massive tracks that defy explanation. Whether the creature is flesh and blood or something stranger, perhaps a guardian of the wild, or even an interdimensional visitor as some fringe researchers suggest. Stories of the Louisiana wildman aren't going away anytime soon, with around 40 to 50 reports. I believe these reports will increase as people push out into these wild areas of the state, especially given the surprising number of sightings and encounters near Alexandria, which is a relatively densely populated area. So in order to determine if these creatures are real, we first have to figure out what else it could be. Theories about what these things could be and trying to identify them as what they are or what they aren't should always be your first step as a skeptic, but also as a believer. It's more important to be certain of what you saw as a believer, since others will dismiss your story or evidence out of instantaneous bias towards any of those stories of that type of nature. So if you start with the ordinary, you can explain a lot of what people are seeing without breaking a sweat. Bears can stand up, looking human-like, and move around with odd shuffling that looks maybe like swaying back and forth. From 50 yards away in a palmetto or sawgrass stand at dusk, that bear may appear to be 7 foot tall and bipedal in your head at least. Feral hogs move fast, making crashing sounds through the underbrush and, moving vegetation around them in violent ways, bending trees, shaking them. Seeing a mange-ridden boar at night as it swiftly either runs at you or away from you will cause you to panic and could create possible misidentifications. Birds like great horned owls and barred owls have odd-sounding calls and eye shine that looks like a larger creature at the edge of a flashlight beam. Herons sitting on low branches produce tall, upright shapes that could look human. Otters bark and splash beside boats and vanish in the night. And then there's nutria, which are like these giant rats, and they slap at the water, but they also have monkey-like calls. And then alligators surface at the worst possible moment and break the calm of the night with their rumbling growls. The environment takes those inputs and amplifies them. Humidity bends distant light, and the fluctuations in temperature around swamps make sound distorted. Headlights can flicker across the water and can be seen through tall grass, which could make them be interpreted as globes of light. Fog erases depth cues, but it also makes lights appear much larger than they actually are. Marsh gases can ignite in small, brief ways that feels like there's some sort of intelligence to it. None of that makes a person foolish for being startled. It means that the environment is busy with life, sounds, insect, and water, which can cause auditory pareidolia. And hoaxes do exist. Footprints can be carved and cast. Some foolish people can purchase costumes and try to scare people at night, but I want to be very clear here. You are taking your life into your own hands when you try to do something like this in the South. A prank may catch someone off guard or instill intense fear in them, and if they fear for their lives, that could lead to someone shooting at that costumed person. It's just not a smart move. You may fool some people with that costume, and you may think, oh, I made those believers look dumb, but there's a chance that you could get shot. And being right or getting one over on someone isn't worth the risk. And there's certainly mundane explanations that we could attribute to every one of these creatures on the list. However, even if one report is not explained by the mundane, that means everything else in that list could be true. Now let's move from cryptids to other high strangeness found in Louisiana. Because not only are cryptids prevalent in Louisiana, hauntings are abundant as well. The Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana is famous for its numerous reported hauntings, including the legend of the enslaved girl Chloe, who is said to have poisoned the Woodruff family and was later hanged. Other phenomena include ghostly apparitions, inexplicable sounds like footsteps and gunshots, and unexplained events such as photos showing transparent figures and a mirror with unremovable handprints. These tales contribute to the plantation's reputation as one of America's most haunted houses, where visitors can experience the history and paranormal activity firsthand. As I said, the most well-known ghost there is Chloe, and she was accused of poisoning the family with oleander leaves in a cake, leading to the deaths of Sarah and her daughters. She was reportedly hanged, and her spirit still lingers on the property, with visitors reporting a cold touch or a mournful sigh. A former owner of the plantation, William Winter, was shot on the front porch in 1871 and died in his wife's arms on the 17th step of the stairs. His ghost is believed to appear on the steps. The plantation is also said to be haunted by the ghosts of several children who died of tuberculosis, as well as a wealthy man and his children who died of yellow fever. A child ghost known as Katie is said to tap dance on a porch, making ghostly sounds that have been heard by visitors and film crews. Another place is the LaLaurie Mansion in New Orleans, and it doesn't need any embellishment. The history of this plantation is documented, and it's ugly. According to the historian Carolyn Marrow Long, Madame LaLaurie was first investigated in 1828 for cruelty towards her enslaved people. Though court records related to this investigation have not been found, there is documentation that Madame LaLaurie paid for legal services and sold a number of enslaved people following the investigation. People report pressure in their chest and a sense of being watched on the stairs. Skeptics point to a psychosomatic cause because of the trauma and the story of the horrible cruelty, and that could be the case. People feeling watched, a tug on their clothes, or a cold breeze could feel paranormal. However, I believe people when they say they have had a paranormal experience, because I have as well. I can also say that a rumor of a haunting could cloud their experiences just as easily. The hauntings of St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 in New Orleans are attributed to a variety of ghosts, the most famous being the voodoo priestess Madame Laveau, whose crypt is still visited by followers. Other alleged spirits include the pirate Bartholomew Lafon, chess champion Paul Morphy, and a sailor named Henry Veens, among others. Visitors have reported a range of paranormal experiences from seeing apparitions to poltergeist activity. And speaking of voodoo, Louisiana voodoo is a religion with origins in West Africa and Haitian traditions, centered on the worship of a creator and spirits called Lwa. In contrast, Louisiana hoodoo is a folk magic practice, also known as root work or conjure, that was developed in the American South. Hoodoo uses practical methods like herbs, roots, and spells for goals like healing, protection, and good fortune, but it's not centered on worshiping deities. For all other things that are unexplainable, we have to put those away into a high-strangeness bucket. When multiple events happen at the same time, it's hard to pin down what is behind the activity. With the amount of high-strangeness events, like cryptids being seen at the same time as a UFO, or howls in the swamps, and then a ghost comes into view, the high-strangeness quotient in the Bayou state is overflowing. And when you lay all these individual strands side by side, cryptids, hauntings, voodoo, strange lights, the connections become undeniable. The same patch of bottomland will produce a Bigfoot-style sighting, a light over water, and a story about a curse from a century ago. A house with a well-known ghost will also generate reports of moving lights in the backyard or a shadow on the road a block or two over. People who make fun of hauntings will talk about a howl that made them leave a fishing spot early. And people who carry rosaries will talk about something tall moving in the cane and never using the word ghost. I believe that all paranormal events are connected through a single underlying system that bleeds into our world from time to time, but which is expressed in different context-driven ways. The same force that creates a spectral entity might also generate a light anomaly or a physical impression of a creature. If you were to ask me to explain the nature of this single spiritual element, I don't have a clear answer. Instead, I have two working models that attempt to determine what it might be. So the first is a spiritual framework. This model is ancient. It suggests that reality includes a layer we don't measure well, the unseen or the other side. In this framework, certain places function as thresholds. Old ground holds impressions, Water carries and concentrates energy, and belief opens doors and keeps them open. A house can keep a memory, a swamp can host a presence. A creature that mimics a primate might not be one at all. It might be a borrowed outline that makes sense to the witness. Voodoo and deep-seated Catholic practice, in this view, are simply practical tools for living in a world like this, where the spiritual layer is the root cause and manifestation of all things paranormal. And then I have a structural framework, or a simulation theory. This model is modern. It suggests that reality behaves like a complex system that handles information. In most places, most of the time, the render is clean. However, in places with complex history, layered belief, and physical abnormalities like high humidity, reverberating sound, and fog, the system throws artifacts. You get brief figures, odd lights, auditory anomalies, and patterns that repeat because of the inputs, like location, history, witness expectation. If you prefer the language of simulation theory, you can call these seams, or weak spots in the structure of reality. These two models do not cancel each other out. If the world has a spiritual layer, it wouldn't be strange for that layer to show up in structural seams. Conversely, if the world is a simulation, it wouldn't be strange for its inhabitants to experience glitches in a spiritual context. In either case, Louisiana has these profound and varied paranormal events because of a culture, belief system, and landscape that uniquely align to make them possible. The unifying supernatural element can then be expressed as a flaw in the system or as a manifestation of spiritual expression. They're two sides of the same coin. Louisiana is unique because it provides two things at once: a rich old collection of legends of the unknown and a steady stream of modern sightings that almost, but not perfectly, match those old stories. The creatures people report, the cryptids, may be real animals that we know, but it could also be the manifestation of this spiritual rift. The hauntings are based on real grief and memory, and they're held in place by old buildings and neighborhoods that seem to keep their past as both a cautionary tale and as a badge of survival. Voodoo isn't just a historical curiosity. It's a practical living system people use to manage what they believe is real. Everything else that can't be neatly categorized goes into the high-strangeness file. But I think, again, this is being played out through this simulation or spiritual layer that we see. It's common to think that with all our cameras, lights, and all that stuff that these mysteries would disappear, but it hasn't. Instead, better technology gives us more ambiguous evidence. Video clips that are cut short, quick flashes, recordings that often raise more questions than answers. Even though we can measure and study the world more than ever, we constantly hit a wall where science can't provide the final answer. When you combine this edge of human knowledge with Louisiana's long history of cultural mixing, you get a simple result. People are having more brushes with the unknown than ever, not fewer. So these different phenomena, cryptids, ghosts, voodoo, all that, may all be different symptoms of one underlying problem. Either the structure of our reality has seams that show under stress, or we genuinely share a space with a spiritual layer that keeps trying to push through. These two ideas aren't opposed. They just might simply be the same simulation or situation described by using two different languages. One speaks the language of science and physical fields. The other speaks the language of prayer and presence. Both, however, point to the exact same places and the same dark hours of the night. If you live in Louisiana and have a report, hear a cry in the swamp, a light over the water, or footsteps where none should be, your documentation is vital. Write it down immediately. Note the parish, the date, the time, the weather, what you were doing, and what changed first. Details beat theory. Send it to or share on Arcane Station, or if you want to send me a note and have it private, I'm happy to receive those emails. Mike at arcane-station.com. I would love to take a look at your stories and have conversations with you. Until next time, stay grounded, keep your eyes open, and remember, the ultimate goal is to get home in one piece and to tell the truth about what you saw so we can all learn from your experiences.